she can't receive calls on her cell phone, and yeah, cards. You can send her a card. She'd really be happy about that. Chris Harper's wearing a boot after injuring his ankle, and also Starla Lee, their kids, as well as Cindy, are all quarantined until next Tuesday, as they have come down with that bug. That's all I have at this moment here. Is there anything else? If not, then Ryan will be leading our singing tonight. Zach will be leading our open prayer. Felix will be leading our devotion.
The first and last verse is 510. On Jordan's stormy banks I stand and cast a wishful eye to Canaan's fair and happy land, where my possessions lie. We will rest in a fair and happy land by and by, just across from the evergreen shore. Sing the song of Moses and the Lamb by and by, and dwell with Jesus evermore. Filled with delight, my raptured soul would here no longer stay. Though Jordan's waves around me roll, fearless I launch away. We will rest in the fair and happy land by and by, just across on the evergreen shore. Sing the song of Moses and the Lamb by and by, and dwell with Jesus evermore. The invitation song will be 207.
As we gather tonight, hear these lessons from your word, we ask that we will open our minds and hear the good lessons from it, and find a way to apply it to ourselves, and use it to shine a light to the world around us. We ask that you be with those that have been mentioned on our sick list, be with those in harm's way around the world, be with those missionaries in the field, spreading the gospel. We ask that you will be with us as we depart here. Keep us safe. Bring us back to the next point in time. These things we ask in your Son's name. Amen. Good evening, or as I said earlier, good morning for whatever reason. So today, I'm going to pose a question. Whenever you have something new, something that you love, right? You just got it, you're super excited. I want to know, how many of us keep it to ourselves? I want us to think on that for a second. Right, when we get maybe new clothes or a new car or a new phone even, right? Or a new tractor, we're super pumped. We have to show it off to at least one person. We're excited. Have you ever talked to someone that's passionate about something?
love something so much, they have to talk about it. They just can't stop going on and on and on. But you can see that the reason why they're doing it is because they love it. They know about it. They can feel it. It's what they're meant to do. So, my question for you is, why aren't we this way with the gospel? We're so sure of what we know. You know, when you get me talking about children, when you get me talking about the things that I love, like maybe comic books, I can go on and on and on. Why aren't we that excited about the gospel? Why aren't we so excited that we're trying to talk to everybody we come across? Why not? See, we're so fixated on the things that are tangible, on the things that we're experiencing right now, but we forget about the important things that we're supposed to be focusing on. And it's on that which is spiritual, on souls. Souls that we're missing out on right now because of whatever reason. I want us to turn to Romans chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. Let's talk about something valuable. Let's talk about something exciting that each and every one of us here knows about. Verse 1. What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? Certainly not. How shall we, who died to sin, live any longer in it? Or do you not know that as many of us as were baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into his death? Therefore we were buried with him through baptism into death, that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. For if we have been united together in the likeness of his death, certainly we also shall be in the likeness of his resurrection. Knowing this, that old man was crucified with him, that the body of sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves to sin. Slaves of sin. For he who has died has been freed from sin. Now, if we died with Christ, we believe that we shall also live with him. Now, I could go on and on and on, but we get the gist of it. We have something exciting to talk about. Something that can take a person, an individual, from not knowing truth to knowing truth, from being saved to from not being saved to being saved. That's exciting. Why do we not want to talk about this? It blows my mind. Why am I so scared of sharing this? Of risking that relationship? Why am I so terrified? When the possibility, even that 1% of their hearts turning towards God is worth it. Yet we sacrifice that 1% every time because of that fear. Turn me to Romans chapter 1, verse 16. We're not going to just talk about fear, we're going to talk about shame. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes, for the Jew first, and also for the Greek. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. Let me move up really quick. It says in verse 15, so as much as is in me, I am ready to preach the gospel to you who are in Rome also. He wanted to know that even though they're from Rome, I want to speak to you too. You're important. Your soul matters. And no matter the possibility of persecution knocking on the door, Paul, Peter, these men stood forward because they knew it was something to get excited for. It was something that meant salvation. Right? We look at our life, it's short in comparison to eternity. And they understood this. So why are we so ashamed? Turn me to 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 13. 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 13 and 14. So it says, "But rejoice to the extent that you partake of Christ's sufferings, that when his glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy. If you are reproached for the name of Christ, blessed are you. For the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. On their part, he is blasphemed, but on your part, he is glorified." When you go out, you might be running the risk of losing a friend. I'm just going to be realistic. You might be running the risk of not talking to your family member for who knows how long. You might be running the risk of this random stranger you don't know not wanting to ever see your face again. But you might be running the risk. Well, you might have a chance for them to see the truth. You might have the chance of them opening their hearts to the Word. For them doing what is right. For them taking that plunge. For them living their life as Christians. Say that's worth the risk. Now, if you know anything about 1 Peter, we know at the time of this letter, Christians were being persecuted. That's why he wrote this about the suffering. They were being persecuted. They were getting beaten, spit on, burned at stakes. There's one instance where we see that fire doesn't reach you, we'll just stab you. That'll work too. This is what these Christians had to go through so that they can deliver the gospel when we're afraid of offending somebody. I'm not just speaking to you, I'm speaking to myself. Because it's scary. I know that. I'm terrified. I love the people I'm around. They're a blessing to me. But how much do I love them? Do I love them enough to risk that? So that they can know? How much do you love them? It's like with a child, right? If you love your child, you don't do everything for them. We were talking about this in class. It would probably be easier to dress that 17-year-old, to feed him, to pay his bills for the rest of his life. Busy for who? Because if you're gone, guess what? He's not going to know how to live life. So as parents, we know that it takes preparation. It takes sometimes tough love. And that's what the truth can be sometimes. It's tough love. So I'm challenging you today to not be so focused on these distractions. Now, yeah, there's some terrible things going on. But there's been terrible things going on since humans have existed. But that does not change the fact that as Christians, we have a mission. So today, I'm going to talk to two people, right? Because I become a Christian. We'd be happy to walk you through it. Hear, believe, repent, confess, baptize, and remain faithful. We can show you all of those scriptures. We can show you what it takes, right? Not by word of mouth, but by God's word. Not by how we feel and what we think, but what God thinks. The example that Christ set. So we're going to give you that opportunity when we extend that invitation. Number two, those of us that are Christians and that are faltering, that are struggling to share the word, that are not as excited, or maybe don't realize the beautiful thing that they, maybe don't remember that feeling they had when it clicked for them. I'm inviting you tonight too. Any of this resonates with either group, please come as we together stand and sing the song of invitation.
Hark the gentle voice of Jesus falleth tenderly upon your ear. Sweetest cry of love and pity calleth, turn and listen, stay and hear. Ye that labor and are heavy laden, lean upon your dear Lord's breast. Ye that labor and are heavy laden, come and I will give you rest. Then his loving tender voice obeying, bear his yoke, his burden take. Find the yoke his hand is on you laying, light and easy for his sake. Ye that labor and are heavy laden, lean upon your dear Lord's breast. Ye that labor and are heavy laden, come and I will give you rest.
Thanks for being here. Glad you're here. We do have folks still from time to time coming down to testing positive. Most of the ones, thankfully, it's been just like a summer cold. Now, that being said, I don't want it. I don't want any of you to have it. But thankfully, most of our members are doing fairly well and riding it out. They are staying in 10 days after their positive test. If you're sick, hey, we love you. Stay home. You know, stay home. Stay home. Don't share. Let's be generous in everything except with COVID. Let's try to keep it at home if we can and do those things. Anything else we can mention? Glad to have Matt back. He's overcoming walk through everything. He had it all. He tried to do it all at one time. At least he got it right. We're glad he's back.
It's efficient. Just knock it
Got
all
one
out.
verse of song? One verse of what? I'll fly away, and our teachers can fly away while we're singing this one verse. you got it. All right, good. 1 Samuel chapter 4 tonight. 1 Samuel chapter 3 is like a great, cool chapter, isn't it? I mean, you got this little kid. His mom and daddy said, I'm going to dedicate you to God. His mama takes him there, and he grows up, and God speaks to him as a young teenager. God speaks to him and tells him what he's got planned for him, what he wants him to do, and what he's going to do. And the beautiful story of that. Then, as so many times happens, the Bible is a lot like life. Have you ever noticed that? You ever notice the Bible's a lot like life? There's some really, really high times, and then it seems like sometimes they just slide back down. But about sort of the way that this chapter is tonight compared to chapter 3. Your dad's still not feeling good? Still kind of draggy? He's fine. He's laying out. Oh, your mother's sick now? Oh, okay. They're quarantining. Okay, good for them. They took my advice. If you're sick, stay home. Now, chapter 4 starts off, and really the first verse of chapter 4 really belongs with chapter 3 and all the ancient manuscripts, all the ancient Hebrew manuscripts. It goes along with it because if you remember the end of verse 3, or the end of chapter 3, the Lord appeared again at Shiloh, for the Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh by the word of the Lord. And then verse 4 should go right with that. And the word of the Lord came, the word of Samuel came to all Israel. Now, there you have, again, an occasion where you can see the chapter and verse divisions of the Bible are not inspired. Okay? That doesn't mean the Bible's not inspired. You can't trust the Bible. You can. But they are when men put them in. They broke them up. And I'll be very honest with you. It's much happier for me that they did that because there's a lot of words in 1 Samuel. And there's a lot of words in 2 Samuel. At one time, they were one book. Think if you had a whole scroll and you had to unroll the whole thing and try to start, look, I want everybody to get together on where are you? Now, keep rolling, keep rolling, keep rolling. Maybe somebody would say, well, maybe it's like 3 feet and 4 inches down. Is that where you'll find the next paragraph there or whatever? But Bishop Usher, a thousand years ago, divided into chapters, and that makes it much more efficient. Verses makes it much more efficient for us. The word of Samuel came to all Israel. We've seen Eli, the sun setting on Eli's career as a priest, as a prophet, as a judge, and it's setting on his life also. By this time, he's well into his 90s. In fact, we're going to learn in just a few more moments, he's 98. And Israel and the Philistines, if you remember, the Philistines and the Israelites have kind of been back and forth ever since the taking of the land of Canaan or the near taking of the land of Canaan when they didn't drive everybody out. They're down along the coast of Phoenicia, and it's just not a very... where's my slides? Okay, we don't have slides. I don't know anybody here that knows how to put them in, so I guess we'll do without slides. Okay. Follow along in the text then. I had some really good slides tonight too, which is really kind of a shame. I was kind of looking forward to it, but I've already got to see them a couple of times, but I thought you'd like them too, so I thought we'd share them together. But Israel's going to go into a battle at Aphek and Ebenezer. Now, Aphek and Ebenezer are about 18 miles apart, they think. Now, Aphek was a common name for towns in Palestine. Can you think of any towns that there's more than one name for? Oh, Trenton. Yeah, there's Trenton, Florida. There's Trenton, Georgia. There's Trenton, New Jersey. There's Trenton, Michigan. And that's just all of them I know of because they all got churches. And when you search Trenton Church of Christ, you come up with Michigan, Florida, et cetera, et cetera. So there's more than one of these towns. However, you can kind of make an idea. And I see if you'll see the really pretty map up there. It's got a good map. They're up in the northern part up there. They're pretty parallel as far as east and west from each other.
because Aphek tends to be out closer to the Mediterranean Sea, and you've got Ebenezer a little further away, about 18 miles away. So the two towns are pretty close together, and they're near the Philistine border, or Philistine border, however you prefer. And there's a battle getting ready to happen. There's going to be two battles, in fact, that are going to happen here. The first battle is, and of course, remember, this conflict, this is not the first battle with the Philistines. This thing's been going on for centuries. And the battle goes on, and Israel goes into battle, and about 4,000 men are slain. Now, to give you a little background of how that would affect a group of people, there were not nearly as many Israelites as there were Americans in 1944. In 1944, we lost over 4,000 men on the first day of D-Day. Okay? So imagine that. I mean, that's one of the most horrific days in American history for the loss of lives. 4,000 men are slaughtered and just die. So they begin to think, what are we going to do? This is terrible. And they come in and said, why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Well, what do you do after you lose? Whether you're coaching, whether you're in business and you're going to try to make a sale and it just goes south, whether in your whatever you do for your living, if you just look back at the end of the day and say, man, that's a mess. What am I going to do? What am I going to do to make this better? Well, that's what the elders of Israel did. They said, what are we going to do? All of a sudden the light bulb came on. Bang, the light popped. They got an idea. Let's bring the Ark of the Covenant here from Shiloh, because guess what? They knew, where did God dwell in the tabernacle? On the top between the cherubim and the mercy seat. They're going to even talk about that. They said, let's bring the Ark of the Covenant out, and guess what we'll do? We'll win. We'll win the battle then. That'll be the thing that'll turn the battle again. And they were familiar with what God wanted them to do, because they knew where God was dwelling. His physical presence was right over the cherubim at the mercy seat. And the Ark of the Covenant here is getting ready to be brought out. And the only place they could get this had to be from looking back at the children of God as they came through the wilderness. And do you remember when they crossed the Jordan River the first time? Who went in first? Anybody remember? Priest. When their foot touched the Jordan River, guess what happened? Their foot touched the Red Sea, guess what happened? Parted. So they marched around Jericho. Guess what happened? With the ark and all the priests fall, they blow the ram's horn, boom, the thing falls down, the walls fall down. So they had some frame of reference of saying where God's ark is. The ark of God is called in, I think, chapter 3 and verse 3 from last week. Wherever the ark of God is, we're going to be successful. Now, that's going to be a good thing. But there's one thing different than when Joshua did it, when Moses did it. They didn't consult God. There's no record that they said, hey, let's ask God what to do. They didn't go to the prophet. They didn't go to Eli. They didn't go to Samuel. They just said, let's bring down here, and it'll save us from these enemies. We're going to be victorious because of this. And so they bring it down, and they're not really going to use the ark as something to be from God. They're using the ark, as a talisman, they're using it as just like an idol, basically. This is our, we joke about, if you're old enough, you remember, we joke about holding up this if somebody's sick, we hold the cross up, and, if you remember The Exorcist, they were like, hold the cross up. Didn't have any power, but people thought it did. Well, here, the Ark of the Covenant is really not going to have a great deal of power because, guess why? It's not much different than the god Dagon we're going to meet in the 5th chapter there. Well, it is different, but the people aren't treating it different. It's just another idol to them. It's just something, this is my good luck charm. Hey, I found a 4-leaf clover today. Boy, everything's going to be great all day. Well, that's not the way it's going to be. And they come out, and you just see so many, I don't know what the right word is, stupid, bad decisions, terrible choices they make in regard to this. Number one is, guess who brings the ark down? Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas. Now, could you have found two worse, more reprobate characters in all of the land than those two? And then they bring the Ark of the Covenant without asking God, without appealing to God for His counsel on this. What do you want us to do? They said, oh, we're going to be safe because we've got the Ark of the Covenant. I just don't know how you could get any things that are in more opposite directions than what they're trying to do right here. You see the frustration. The Ark of the Covenant was the dwelling place of God, but it was to be approached reverently, and it was to be approached through God's high priest and through the prophets. So now in verse 5, man, you can just hear the excitement. The people are sitting there and they're going, oh man, how are we going to bury all these dead? They're out stripping the armor off of them right now. They're taking all their clothes. They're taking all the stuff. They're taking all the spoil from our 4,000 dead brothers out there in battle. What's it going to be like for us next? And then all of a sudden, somebody says, what is that gleaming down there? Look, the sun's reflect. That's the ark. And all of a sudden, the crowd just goes, the army just goes crazy. And it says the ground was shaking. They were so excited. There have been tales of college football games and pro football games when something happened late in the ball game and turned the whole time. They said that, these huge stadiums that'll seat 100,000 people are literally shaking with the crowd's excitement and the noise they're making. That's what's going on here right now. These people are so loud, they're so excited that the ground's shaking. And again, you see how Ebenezer and Aphek must have been close, because it says the Philistines heard the noise. Man, they hear all this noise. They're going, whoa, what's going on? And they begin, now the Israelites have been talking about, what are we going to do? Now guess what they're going to begin to do? They're going to say, what are we going to do now? How are we going to handle this? Because guess what the Philistines start quoting? Telling about the story of Moses and the plagues in Egypt and all the things that God did for them. And they say, how can we defeat these gods? Now, they use the plural gods because they were polytheistic. They believed in a lot of gods. They said, how can we defeat these gods, these mighty gods in verse 8. And God's people were designed to show, just like we are today, like Felix did such a good job with in class of illustrating, are designed to show that we're a different kind of people. We talked last Sunday about having a different spirit. We're a peculiar people. We don't fit in with the world. We don't just blend right in, and whenever they're doing wrong, we go right along with them just because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I don't want to tell anybody that what they're doing is wrong. I'm just going to quietly maybe try not to get too involved, but I'm going to be kind of on the edge with it. He says, hey, these guys got the God of the land. They don't recognize this as being any different than anything else they see. Do you think the Philistines ever took their gods into battle with them? We know they did. We know they did. They'd carry them into battle. They'd carry them, images of them up on a post to lead into battle because they were pagans. That's what they do. Now, what do they see the Israelites doing? Hey, they're doing the same thing. They got their pagan god and their God. We know their God is tough. The God of their land is tough because, man, what they did to the Egyptians, and they were stronger than we are. And they wiped out the Egyptian army. What are they going to do to us? Well, now you got to make a decision. When you look at something as a soldier, and you realize you're a leader of the soldiers anyway. Soldiers don't have much choice, but you're a leader in the military. You realize this does not look good for us. This is a bad-looking situation. We don't look like we got a chance over here. So what are we going to do? We're going to quit and run? Or are we going to stand and fight? Well, he says, here's what you're going to do. Look, these Israelites have been our slaves for years. Now, if we don't stand right now, take a stand, we're going to be their slaves. Now, that's kind of going to, it's almost happen about 300. What's going to happen? Right between the eyes, got the big guy, knocked him down, and all of a sudden the Philistines became the slaves of the Israelites. But in verse number 9, he says, take courage and be men. Some of the versions say, acquit yourselves like men. The English Standard says, take courage, fight like men. The conviction, now these Philistines have got to say, look, we got to fight, not just against these Israelites who are about this tall. We got to fight against this big God they've got. But hey, it's either fight, die free, or live slaves. And they said, we're going to die free if we have to die. So all of a sudden now, you're going to see in the next verse, guess what started to unwind? Remember what was told Eli? Guess what's going to happen? Same day, what's going to happen? 2 sons are going to die. Guess what's going to happen? It's going to begin to unwind now. In verse 10, Israel is going to suffer a horrible defeat. There are going to be 30,000 men slaughtered in one day in one battle. Now again, I think everybody in here is old enough to sort of have some remembrance or knowledge of Vietnam. In Vietnam, we lost 58 or 59,000 men over a 20-year period. They lost half of that many people in one day. One day they lose what we lost at D-Day roughly. A few days later, they lost half of what died in Vietnam in that war over there. So it's going to be a terrible, 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 terrible thing. Verse 10, the ark was captured, and the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were slain. Now, that's pretty rough stuff right there. That's pretty rough stuff. But then it's going to continue for this family, the prophecy and the punishment is just going to get worse and worse and worse. In verse 12, it says, a man of Benjamin ran from the battle line and came to Shiloh the same day with his clothes torn and dirt on his head. Now, if you have any question about why it says Eli couldn't see, guess what Eli couldn't see? He heard this guy pull up, but now if you see somebody coming in from a battle, his clothes are all ripped, he's got dirt all over his head and all over him, what are you going to think? You don't think he went really good? Probably not. Probably not a very good battle. But this guy comes in, Eli can't see him, so Eli says, how'd the battle go, my son? Tell me, what happened, son? Give me the news. Give me the news. Eli's sitting in his seat, probably outside the tabernacle. And this young man comes up and he says, well, before he gets there, I just want to emphasize too, it says, in verse 13, when he arrived, Eli was sitting on his seat by the road watching, for his heart trembled He had 2 sons out there, right? He was worried about his sons. No. He said he was concerned about the ark of God. Concerned about the ark of it, trembled and feared for the ark of God. When the man came into the city and told the news, all the city cried out. Guy comes in the city on his way to meet Eli, and guess what everybody's asking? He runs, how did battle go? It's terrible. We lost 30,000 men. The ark's captured. 2 of our priests, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead. How'd it go? And he tells the story again. And he keeps going deeper and deeper into the city. Finally gets to the tabernacle. Eli is sitting there. Eli says, how'd it go, son? Because Eli heard the uproar. He heard everybody. I mean, as you know from reading, you probably, if you study even sociology today much, you know, Middle Eastern people are very emotional, very loud. Weeping and wailing is not an unheard of thing. He heard the wailing, he hears the noise, hears the outcry, and he comes in and he said, now tell me, what's the uproar? What happened? And the young man came and heard and came and told Eli. In verse 15, now Eli was 98 years old and his eyes were set so that he could not see, or he was blind. And the man said to Eli, I am he who came from the battle. I fled from the battle today. How'd it go, son? Don't make me keep out. I just want to know what's going on. And he who brought the news answered and said, Israel has fled before the Philistines, and there has been a great defeat among the people. Your 2 sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been captured. Now you talk about a priest, a judge, a prophet getting bad news. The news was so bad, the news of his sons dying was not even the worst news he got. Because here a man who's devoted his life to serving God gets the news that the ark of God, the dwelling place of God on this earth, where God communed with man on this earth, has been captured by these pagans. I don't know, I start to say it's unusual. It's somewhat odd to us to try to understand it, because he says, when he hears about the death, when he mentioned the ark in verse 18, as soon as he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell over backward from his seat by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died, for he was old and heavy. He had judged Israel for 40 years. How many times, I hope it hasn't been many times in your life, that you had to be around someone and had to deliver news to them, and it literally knocked them to their knees. They just almost collapsed. Well, that's not a pleasant thing to do, but it is just a sign of this is so overwhelming. This is so surprising. This is so painful to me. I don't know what to do. Here, this man of God hears the Ark of the Covenant has been captured by God's greatest enemies. They've got it. He can only imagine what's going on. And it was so emotional. I don't know if he had tried to stand up, and then when he sat back, he fell over backward, whether he was sitting there and it was just too much. He just leaned back and got to going back, but he fell back and he broke his neck and he died, because he said he was old and big. He was a big boy. And he fell back and died. That's tough. That's tough. Because all of a sudden now, it seems like that everything that could happen to this family bad has happened. Now his daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant and about to give birth. When she heard the news the ark was captured and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed and gave birth, for her pains came upon her. Bad news sent her into labor. Such trauma and just more than she could bear. and the emotions sent her into labor, and so she's going to have a baby. About the time of her death, the women attended to her said, "Do not be afraid, for you have borne a son." Now, again, you want to see a tragedy to a family in one day. Number one, the patriarch of the family has had to get the worst news that he could imagine. And it wasn't even about his sons dying. It was that what he had spent his lifetime devoted to. The presence of God. The place where he had communed with God many times. Now, the Ark of the Covenant is in the hands of the Philistines. His sons, both dead. Guess what that means? No lineage. That's it. Not going to be any more of Eli's descendants, perhaps except one. And then, he's already dead now. And if you're watching the family, now the mother goes into labor, the daughter-in-law, who's going to be the mother of this new baby, goes into labor. And just before she dies, she looks out, and in verse 21, she named the child Ichabod, saying, "The glory has departed from Israel." She did that. She did that. Now, if you look at this, you might say, well, wait a minute. It says, before she died, and about that time of her death, the women attended her said to her, "Do not be afraid," but she did not answer or pay attention. Remember, what language are you reading the Bible in? English. Hebrew, sometimes the grammatical things are in different order. You'll read things in different order. Sometimes also, the Bible doesn't put things in chronological order. It puts them in an order to make the impact, to make the point the best way it can be. And now, the daughter-in-law has died. The baby's born. Before she named it, before she died, she named it Ichabod. Ichabod means the glory is departed, or it means no glory. It means the glory of God is gone. Not a great name for a child, but at the same time, many children, particularly in the Old Testament, particularly children of prophets, were given names that were symbolic, that meant something about that was going to happen. And she said, "The glory has departed of Israel, for the ark of God has been captured." The glory is departed. What a terrible, terrible, terrible day. I mean, we look about and we think about Samuel, and last week we talked about how sweet it was that his mother would bring him the leaf of the little robe to wear every year, and he got bigger, and you thought how sweet those times must have been when Mom came to visit with Dad and all the things that were going on with that. And he got to see all his new brothers and sisters every year because she was pretty prodigious at having babies. God blessed her with a great blessing of that. That's such a bright moment. And then this chapter is just filled with bad choices by God's people and then the bad outcome of them. They could have made good choices. They had the opportunity to. Could they have called Eli in and said, "Eli, what do we need to do? Would you pray for us to God? Ask God to give us victory. Ask God, can we take the Ark of the Covenant in to encourage our people, to lift us up? Can we all come and worship and make a sacrifice to you, to God?" They didn't do that. They said, "Hey, we got the solution. Let's grab this altar and let's go." It's on us, our power, not God. Oh, God will be along with us, but it's our decision, our power. Didn't work out very well for them. Didn't happen to be very good for them. That is a powerful lesson. You better do God's things God's way, and there's nothing too small and nothing too large to ask God about. I've had people call me and just say, "Look, can we pray together on the phone?" Yeah, we can. And some of the things, if I told you some of the things that people ask me to pray about, you say, "That's not worth praying about." Well, if it concerns you, it's worth praying about. Now, there might be some things that God's going to filter out, like I've, for 14 years of coaching, we had a prayer before and after every ball game. I never prayed that we'd win. Prayed we'd be safe. Prayed that we'd conduct ourselves as godly young men, that I'd conduct myself as a coach, and my staff would do things to reflect the glory of God. Because guess what? I don't think God cares who wins or not. I was a state final. I don't think God cared whether we won. I don't think we won because we were more godly than those other guys. I don't think we lost the time we lost because we were less godly than the other team. But I do think if it's important to you, it's important to pray about it. And that's where these people went wrong. They didn't ask God. They had all these, well, I know all this will work because I've seen this work before. Maybe if we take communion now, maybe that'll help everything to be better. I've had people ask me to bring communion to the hospital on Tuesdays and Tuesday night. Well, I said, I'd really rather not do that. It's for the Lord's Day. But I said, we will come up there and we'll pray about you and we'll pray about this situation. But we're not going to take the Lord's Supper. It's not a magic, this magic cracker and this magic juice and all of a sudden everything gets better. It's not that way. Now, on the Lord's Day, we gather around that table. It's the most precious thing we do. But to do it again as just this is a ritual. If I do this, maybe I'll get well, or my brother will get well, or my mother, or my husband, or my wife, or my kid, or whoever will get well. If I take this right now, because it's, it's good luck, isn't it, right? It's good luck. It's not good luck. It's not good luck. It's being what God wants us to be. It's doing what God tells us to do. It's exactly right. It's exactly right. Very good point. Ma'am, you have something to say? Sharon? Oh. Yeah, it's like, hey, we found a 4-leaf clover. Let's take communion on Tuesday night because it's like a 4-leaf clover. If we do this, we'll be lucky, right? And if we do this, God will make him get better. No, and I'm not making light at all of the Lord's Supper. Because if you pick up one of those cups out there tonight and take it home with you, or one of your kids, I had a lady years ago just freak out because her child had taken communion when they were passing it around. I don't mean he was drinking after I'd already taken it, but he took a cup of his own, and before I could stop him, he drank it. But he got a little tiny drink of grape juice. I mean, that's all it is. I've had people say, well, so-and-so wasn't a Christian, and they took the Lord's Supper. They're eating and drinking damnation. And so, no, they're not. No, they're not. If you're not a Christian, are you saved? Don't think so. Not according to what? If you're outside of Christ, it's the only place salvation is. So guess what? If someone outside of Christ is sitting in our assembly on Sunday morning, and they take one of those little cups of grape juice, and after they've eaten a little bite of cracker, they might pick up, 6 or 8 calories or whatever, but it's not gonna make any difference spiritually. And a friend of mine a few years ago, a black preacher friend, said, can't nobody be double damned. You can't be double condemned. You're already condemned. You can't be condemned twice. So if somebody's already lost comes in and takes the Lord's Supper, you don't need to have a meltdown about that. They've already got other things they got to worry about. Whether or not they take a drink of grape juice or not, doesn't matter. But the whole point is it's not, the power is not in that. The power is when we're together around the Lord's table. Right out there tonight, it's just grape juice. It's a little cracker. It's nothing else. Now, Sunday morning, when we're together, we assemble together and we're taking the Lord's Supper, it becomes something powerful then. The Ark of the Covenant. When God told Joshua and told Moses to use it to lead the people, when Joshua told those priests to step in the water, the ark was powerful. Why? Why was it powerful that day? Following God's commandments, weren't they? Doing what God said to do. It has great power. those little cups, cracker and grape juice in them, Sunday morning they have great power. Power to affect our lives. Tonight, if you take one and drink it on the way home, it's a little bit of grape juice, a little bit of cracker. And it's nothing wrong. It's nothing, to be too worried about. Like I say, kids drank them all the time. We were kids. My mother used to make the Lord's Supper, and she'd break the bread and do the cups, take them home, have to wash them by hand because they had glass cups. If you're old enough, you remember those. And they did those. They'd be laid out on a towel. When she came in, sometimes we did. My sister and I'd get in there, we'd pour what grape juice was left over into a little cup and drink the grape juice. Sometimes we even drank all the little grape juice cups just fast as we could. We'd eat the leftover unleavened bread. Were we doing anything wrong? Was there anything sacred about that? No. You ever known anybody that liked the matzo crackers, the unleavened bread? Jamie does. My mom does. My mom buys them every time she goes to Publix. She buys it. I just like the way it tastes. But she's not partaking of the Lord's Supper when she does that. What made this unsuccessful for them was, even though they had the right element, they didn't have the right attitude. They were not being obedient to God. We're not obedient to God, things don't work out good. Next week, we're going to find out that even though today's a bad day, it's going to end up in a temple of a pagan god, but you're still going to find out God's got power. Read the 5th chapter and study it next week, and we'll see you then. Final thoughts, comments, ideas? Ma'am. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. She's been battling bladder cancer, I think, for a while now. Sorry to hear about that. Linda Getter had a biopsy done, and I don't know. I hadn't heard. Didn't hear from her. I'll try to catch her tonight, maybe in the morning. Nothing else? You're dismissed. Have a great week. See you.